Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Debbie Drell, Director of Membership at the National Organization for Rare Disorders. We are hosting a monthly policy webinar for our members, and thank you for allowing me to be your facilitator, although you had no choice. I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. All the lines are muted except for the speakers. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available shortly after. We will put a link out in our e-newsletter for any of your colleagues that you'd like to share this information. NORD's monthly webinars are a benefit to our member organizations. And this is something that we provide to you, not just on policy, but on capacity building. And next year, we're gonna have so many webinars and presentations that will really help strengthen your organization's work, as well as give you important policy news. So moving along, our agenda for today is, I'm going to be brief, going to give a couple of updates, and then I'm going to turn it over to policy. Rachel Scher, our Vice President of Policy and Regulatory Affairs, is going to kick us off, and then we have a lot to talk about. This is your membership team. We've expanded. We're so grateful to have Ashanti De Silva start. She is helping with all of our membership benefits and our renewals. Emily Ann Meyer and Allie Crafton are involved in Rare Launch, but the four of us are here to support you. Whatever your needs are, you can reach any of us through membership@rarediseases.org, or just a pro tip, the first name, first initial, and last name @rarediseases.org. So D. Drell, E. Meyer, A. De Silva, A. Crafton. So now you know. NORD's mission, and we always talk about our mission every time we do a webinar. Our mission is your mission. We're an independent nonprofit. We're leading the fight to improve the lives of rare disease patients and families. When there are no nonprofits, we help the community start nonprofits. And when there are nonprofits, we support you through membership and other resources. Big news. Do you want $500 for your organization, a quick shot in the arm, an Amazon gift card that you can use for whatever your needs are next year? Do you want a member of our membership team to speak at a virtual conference next year, or on a skills building webinar, or to your board of directors? You can win one of these prizes by participating in our Rare Disease Day contest. Hashtag show your stripes. What this means is every rare disease population has a unique identity. For pulmonary hypertension, which is my sister's, they like the color periwinkle because it's the color the lips turn when you lose oxygen. And they also love zebras. And so a twist of show your stripes would be like a purple striped zebra, perhaps, or purple lips with zebra decorations, whatever. Your organization can either identify an artist, maybe a board member or a community member, or you can ask your whole community to submit ideas, and your organization can submit one creative manifestation of of your zebra stripes, whatever that looks like. Perhaps it's a basic zebra, or perhaps it's a cowboy zebra, whatever you want. But the more creative, the better. But you can really showcase your organization. It will go on our Facebook. People will vote for you, and the winner gets, there's 3 winners. The top voted winners get $500, and then the number 1 winner gets a NORD member plus $500. So that is a big contest that we're hosting. And you don't have to do a graphic design. You can do a poem or a haiku. You can do a video, whatever that art is. You can make a cake or whatever, pumpkin carving, whatever it is that is your creative angle. We welcome you to submit that. And the details are in the link on the webpage, but we'll throw that into the chat as well, into the Zoom. So finally, save the date, January 27th, we're doing our all-member meeting, which is something that our bylaws require. Every year we have an annual meeting where the board updates you on what has come to pass in the year and what we will look forward to in the future. We're going to do a pandemic rundown. What did the pandemic mean for rare diseases? What does it mean in the future in 2021? And you'll be joined with Peter Saltonstall, Pamela Gavin, and 2 members of our board who are also membership committee members. So on that note, I am so thrilled to introduce Rachel Scher. If you haven't met her, or if you haven't heard or seen her on previous calls, she is a force to be reckoned with at NORD, and we're so grateful to have her. Rachel, just say next slide and unmute, and we will get you started.
All right, thank you, Debbie. And welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I know everyone is spending a lot of time on the computer these days, so we appreciate your extra time here. And as Debbie said, we will try to make this as interesting and useful as possible. So on this slide, I think we've shown this before. This is just our whole team. All of us are assembled here today on the call, and you'll hear from most of us, with the exception of Kristen, I don't think is with us today. Kristen is our grassroots coordinator. You have the rest of the policy team here. And again, we will walk through some issues that we want to discuss with you today. Quick overview of what we were hoping to cover here today. We have been getting a lot of questions, and I know Debbie has too, about the COVID-19 vaccines that are looking like two of which are going to be available very soon. So we just kind of compiled a lot of the information that you may or may not have heard and want to do our best to walk through what we know and answer the questions that you have. I know on our last call, we talked a little bit about 2021 and what's to come. So we're going to quickly recap some of those issues. And finally, we just want to hear from you on anything that we covered with respect to vaccines and the policy issues, but also things that we didn't cover and things that you think we need to focus on as we move into 2021. So that's an overview of today, and we'll get into some information on the vaccines. So first of all, I think it's really important when you think about where we are today on COVID and the vaccines to remember that we are really in a historic moment here in terms of just how quickly we have gotten to this point that FDA is looking at an application for a vaccine. As you see here, typically, if you go through all of these different stages of vaccine development, and this is with respect to both vaccines that were quickly made available, as you see here in prior years was about 4 years. And then just the typical time is usually about 10 years. So you see here on this timeline that we really have moved at an incredible speed. And obviously the administration's initiative on this is called Warp Speed, which I think you have to agree is a good name for this initiative. I think it's a result of everyone coming together, all kinds of companies coming together, the scientific community, the government, FDA and the NIH and CDC have all played critical roles, as we'll touch on. So really, we're at the cusp of a historic development here with even talking about having access to vaccines. So a little bit on the specifics, as I'm sure you've heard, there are 2 sponsors that have actually submitted what's called an emergency use authorization to the FDA for their COVID vaccine. It's Pfizer and Moderna are the 2 companies. So we'll get into a little more about sort of what's happening and the timing with respect to each of those. But first wanted to just do a little level setting with just what is an EUA and how does that differ from full approval. We can share some more extensive information with you that FDA has up on its website. But in a nutshell, an emergency use authorization is what it sounds like. It's FDA authorizing, but not approving, not granting it a full approval, the use of a product, whether that be a drug or a device, during the time period of a public health emergency, which obviously we are in. But it's important to remember that it is not a full approval. It is just FDA saying we have enough evidence and there is enough of an unmet need in the middle of a public health emergency to say that it's appropriate for us to go ahead and let the public have access to these products. And you saw this throughout the entire pandemic thus far with respect to the devices, which is the diagnostic test. So there are several, not several, many different diagnostic tests that the Devices Center at FDA have granted EUA for just those diagnostics. These would be the first vaccines this week that are going to, as we will get into, that are going to the advisory committee that would be eligible for the emergency use authorization on that side. So it is a lower standard. It is, FDA is doing everything it can to get adequate evidence of safety and effectiveness, but it is not the full approval, and FDA will require, in order to stay on the market beyond the emergency that we're in right now, the submission of a full application, which in this case would be what's called a biologics license application, or a BLA. And within the BLA is where FDA would assess all of the clinical data that exists with respect to demonstrating the safety and effectiveness of the product. So while hopefully, as we'll discuss, these two vaccines do get the EUA very soon, there will be an expectation that they will continue to test the vaccines and continue to collect data as it's used out in the general public to support its application for full approval to FDA. Here's a little bit more about the timelines, which again, I'm sure you are hearing. Pfizer's vaccine, which was the first one that was submitted, will go before FDA's Vaccines Advisory Committee. That will be December 10th, and the advisory committee is made up of several different non-FDA scientists who will have access to the same information basically that FDA looked at and be able to give FDA, as the title says, their advice about whether or not FDA should or should not, in this case, grant an emergency use authorization. Moderna's will come soon after. The advisory committee for Moderna's vaccine will meet on December 17th, so next week. And Peter Marks, who is the head of FDA's Biologics Center, has been very careful to say, first of all, that whatever the vaccines committee says is not the final say. FDA has the final say. And FDA will need, as he said it, a few days to a few weeks after this meeting that will happen for the Pfizer vaccine on December 10th. I think you can see that FDA has been pouring unbelievable resources, with good reason, into reviewing these applications. And they will, I think, move as soon as humanly possible. But there was just an article today where he was quoted saying, don't expect FDA to grant the EUA on the same day as these advisory committees. So anyways, I think we can expect to see it within hopefully a few days at best after December 10th. As you see here on, this is another sort of vaccine life cycle graph. You can see it all laid out where FDA's review is. And then you also see on here the ACIP review, the ACIP review, which is CDC. And CDC, as I mentioned, has played a really critical role in this whole process. They met, they also have an advisory committee on immunization practices, which makes recommendations to CDC about the distribution guidelines. And so this is where we have gotten a lot of questions from folks about sort of when will I be able to get the vaccine? And there are a lot of different factors and questions that the advisory committee is going to look at here about who should get the vaccine and when. And so the advisory committee met on December 1st, so even ahead of, obviously, the FDA's review or final say on this, to really look at what makes most sense in terms of distributing the vaccine as soon as possible. They did come to a conclusion on what is called Group 1A, and that is that the first wave of immunization should go to healthcare workers and people in long-term care facilities. So as you see here, that's approximately 24 million people. The committee is going to reconvene and think about and make recommendations on the subsequent groups, including Group 1B, which is the essential workers, and 1C, which is Americans who are 65 and older and those with other risk factors. It's important, though, to remember that the distribution ultimately is going to be up to the governors and the states. These are guidelines from the CDC, which are not necessarily binding on any of the states. I do think we can expect to see that most states will follow these guidelines, though. So we will be watching, and as I said, I think we can hope to see that the EUAs do get issued in the next few days, at least for the Pfizer one. But as I'm sure you have seen in the press, that there are a lot of questions that are still going to remain even after the EUA is granted. As many of you know, clinical trials are by design only a sliver of the population. They only represent certain people who were eligible for the clinical trial. So once any drug, whether it's a vaccine or drug or biologic, gets out and is used in the population writ large, there are questions and issues that come about that we wouldn't have known during the clinical trials. Now, with the EUA, that's even more acute in terms of the questions that are going to be there, because again, this is a decision that these products should be allowed on the market because we're in the middle of an emergency. So some of the questions that people are going to be looking at once the EUA is granted are these. Are there safety concerns that are going to come out that we don't know about? So far, the data looks pretty good that the safety issues are pretty minimal, but these are things that FDA will continue to be looking at. Does the vaccine protect against transmission? So does it protect against infection? And as I'm sure you know, there's something called asymptomatic spread. So does it stop that? These are just two vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine that are coming out, but there are more coming down the pike. So we, FDA and everyone else will be watching to see if certain vaccines work better for certain populations. So, and then same type of question with respect to rare diseases, which again is something that we will be asking FDA about, to be sure, is sort of how the different vaccines will work for those with rare diseases. We have already reached out and been in touch with FDA about getting together a webinar. So we're really hoping they will join us again like they did for our COVID-19 webinar a couple months ago and speak directly to the rare disease community. So more to come on that. We will also, of course, be looking for resources to share out with the community, just to make sure that everyone understands what we do and don't know about the vaccines as they come online. Okay, so now we wanted to just, again, turn to a quick review of the policy issues that we think are going to be coming up in 2021. And here's where we're going to do a bit of tag team here with everybody kind of taking on issues they work on. So you stop listening to me talk the whole time. So we'll start with at the federal level, things that we think are going to be coming up next year in Congress, and Heidi to talk about a couple things there.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll touch very briefly in that NORD is continuing to watch discussions around doing another COVID relief package. Those have gained steam in the last couple of weeks. They seem to be narrowing in on around a $900 billion to $1 trillion package, but the details of that are still very much up in the air. But it seems more feasible than it has in the last couple of months that a package may actually come together. So that's good news. And then we're also continuing to work hard on the telehealth front. A lot of the telehealth expansion has been enabled by the Public Health Emergency Declaration, which right now runs through mid-January. But NORD is also pushing hard to see some permanent expansion of telehealth access included in a COVID relief package or in any kind of end-of-year package. So we are getting ready to send a letter to congressional leadership making that request. And then we've also been engaging with some of the biggest insurers and sent them a letter asking that all cost sharing related to telehealth services be waived during the public health emergency. So that started a good dialogue with some insurers, and we're going to continue to work and fight for that moving forward. So I will turn to my colleague Corinne now for the other updates.
Hi there, everybody. So I'm going to tackle the next three bullets. First is drug pricing. So as a candidate, President-elect Biden had a pretty expansive drug pricing agenda that he had been proposing, but now going into 2021, it's unclear what from that agenda he's going to be able to accomplish legislatively, since it is looking likely that we are going to have a divided Congress with a Democratic-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate. So we're going to be watching this closely. I don't have a ton of updates on this to see what issues and what proposals come to the forefront in the new year. The next thing I'm going to talk about is Medicaid. So I think, as we all are aware, the economic downturn caused by COVID-19 has created significant budget challenges for states. Federal lawmakers acted in March to provide additional Medicaid funding through the CARES Act, but even so, states are expected to try and make widespread cuts to Medicaid and to other health programs in order to balance their budgets in the new year. NORD and our coalition partners have called on Congress already to provide additional and longer lasting federal assistance to states in any kind of future COVID relief package. If we don't have one happening soon, we're going to continue to ask them to do that in the new year. And then otherwise, the policy team is going to be watching states closely to ensure that patient access is not impacted by harsh budget cuts to Medicaid programs. And last but not least on my list of bullets that I'm covering is the Affordable Care Act. So last month, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case of California v. Texas on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. The Supreme Court could choose to strike down the ACA either entirely or in part. Regardless, we're not going to know that outcome until early in the new year. If the ACA is struck down, there's going to be significant legislative activity to address the vacuum that would create. And as all of us on the phone know, the ACA is of critical importance to our patients. So this is another area that we are watching very closely and will continue to do so in 2021. That is it for me. So next I am going to pass back to my colleagues to talk about newborn screening.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to talk about newborn screening and the UFAs. So as you likely know, newborn screening is a big priority for us. And the federal program authorization lapsed back in 2019. And unfortunately, federal legislation is unlikely to pass during the remainder of this Congress. But NORD is going to continue to fight and ensure that these federal programs are funded. And it shouldn't disrupt anything that goes on in the states. So we're just going to keep an eye on it and keep pushing to get the programs federally reauthorized. Next up is the UFAs, and if you're unaware, these are the user fee authorizations. They are fees that are paid by a sponsor to the FDA when they submit a drug for approval. And so every 5 years, industry, FDA, and various stakeholders, including NORD, get together and discuss and determine how the funds are going to be utilized. This could be enhancing drug development review programs specifically, and previously in the past we pushed for patient-focused drug development efforts using this vehicle. And so they are large must-pass vehicles in the Congress, and currently the programs up for reauthorization are around prescription drugs, medical devices, generic drugs, and biosimilars. So we are engaging on all those fronts in order to advocate for robust policies. I think now it's up to the Rare Disease Advisory Councils.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk very briefly about our Rare Disease Advisory Council work. As we've talked about previously on these calls, a Rare Disease Advisory Council is an advisory body that's created at the state level to advise state government and other stakeholders at the state level on the state of rare diseases. 14, now 15 states have passed legislation to help establish a council or a committee like this at the state level. Hot off the presses, just an hour ago, Ohio actually passed a Rare Disease Advisory Council, and that now heads to Governor DeWine's desk there. So stay tuned. That could be our 15th council across the country. So going into 2021, this remains a big priority for NORD. We recently launched a project called Project RDAC to help optimize the existing councils across the country and help more states pass this legislation. So stay tuned. Many states are working on a council. We recently launched a website that I'll drop into the chat that shows where there's active legislation or coalitions forming across the country to work on this. So if you're interested, please reach out to rdac@rarediseases.org. And now I'll turn it over to my colleagues Anissa and Elise to talk about a few other state priorities. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Rose. So RDAC is, of course, going to be a huge focus in most of our states in 2021, and some other issues of focus that we are expecting in some of our states in the upcoming 2021 session are some step therapy bills and Medicaid expansion bills. And a reminder of what step therapy is it's when insurers, public or private, require patients to take one or more alternative medications before permitting the patients to access the medicine that was actually prescribed by their provider. So as a result, it can delay appropriate treatment for the rare disease community. So Elise and I are both involved in coalitions with other patient advocacy organizations to prepare and strategize for this upcoming session. And we will also likely provide some assistance with some copay accumulator program legislation and focus on out-of-pocket costs. So we will be working closely with our state ambassadors and RAN advocates on taking action through various action alerts and encouraging our advocates to share their stories. So if you or you know of any patients or families or caregivers who are interested in sharing their stories related to some of these issues, then we'd love to connect. So please reach out to us. And with that, I will turn it over to Elise with some information about our state report card. Thank you.
Thank you. So every year, NORD publishes a state report card that serves as an evaluation of the state policies that are pertinent to the rare disease community. And the goal is to provide a roadmap to the rare disease community of where each state can improve and hopefully ultimately push forward the discussion on public policy. So we're excited to share with you that our new report cards will be coming soon and welcome you to visit our website. And you can have a chance to see where your state is and where you measure up. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Rachel.
Thanks, everyone. And just as a reminder, after we ended with Elise and Anissa, is that they are our state policy managers. I neglected to go over it, but we can get it for you. The map that was on the initial slide, that we have divided up the country, and Anissa is our state policy manager for the eastern states. It's not divided halfway down the country, but for the eastern region, and Elise is the western region. Anissa is based out of Nashville, and even after the pandemic will stay in Nashville, and Elise is in Denver, so that both of them, once we go back to traveling, will have easy access to states within their region. So if you ever have questions that come up within a specific state, they will be your go-to people, but obviously feel free to reach out to any one of us and we can get you to them or to the right person. Again, just some more updates about things coming up. Rose mentioned the Project RDAC, which we're really excited about. All of you would be invited to come to the first stakeholders meeting that we're having on December 16th from 2:30 to 3:30. I think Rose put that in the chat to sign up. And then obviously we have a lot of different Rare Disease Day events coming up in February. All of the events will be virtual this year, but we have a really exciting lineup. Anissa and Elise have been working with Kristen and our state ambassadors to pull together really interesting agendas and meetings that will be virtual. So be on the lookout on that. There will be information posted on our website about those events. Well, we want you to know, as I said, that we are here to serve our members. I mean, that is what we think about on a daily basis. And it does not have to be only in the context of these webinars. Debbie did put in the chat the contact email for us. So please use it. I mean, please feel free to shoot us a note at any point, and we're happy to hop on calls with you, talk through some of these things at any point.
I am going to wrap up with a last plug to save the date. January 27th, the new year is going to quickly come upon us. Save the date and time. The Zoom will be following in future NORD member e-newsletters, but this is our annual meeting, and we hope that you can join us to hear our president and CEO, our chief strategy officer, and our board members who are on the membership committee. We love you. Thank you for being a part of this meeting, and we hope that you have a safe, healthy, masked up, good New Year's.